Imagine this. You are standing in a room filled with smoke, and the only way to see clearly is to stop running towards the exits and instead stand perfectly still. This is the foundational paradox that the men who constructed the world around you have spent their lives ensuring you never discover. They have built a labyrinth of expectations, a silent architecture of control, not with locks and chains, but with words like strength, protection, and stability. They have told you that their silence is peace, that their emotional unavailability is reliability, and that their need to dominate every room is simply a biological imperative. But what if that architecture wasn't a fortress? What if it was a prison, and they have quietly, desperately, handed you the keys to the very cell they are trapped in? This is not a video about men versus women. That is the distraction, the smoke. This is about the deep psychological structure that has convinced half the population to suppress their own humanity, while convincing the other half that they must manage the consequences of that suppression. You have felt the weight of this. You have asked a man what he is feeling and watched the walls go up. You have witnessed the silent collapse behind a forced smile. And you have been told that your intuition, your perception of this tension, is paranoia. But what if your intuition was the only accurate map? What if the reason men have built these walls is not because they want to keep you out, but because they are terrified you will see what is inside? The title says men do not want you to find this video. The real question isn't why they don't want you to find it. The real question is, what are they so afraid you will finally see? And why is your discovery of that truth the only thing that can actually save them? If this kind of deep psychological excavation speaks to something you have felt but never been able to name, hit subscribe right now, because this channel does not offer surface advice. We dismantle the hidden architectures shaping your life so you can finally see clearly. The root cause, as dissected by the psychological architects who dare to look beneath the surface, is not hatred, not toxic masculinity in its simplistic definition, but something far more insidious, a severance. It is the ancient wound of disconnection from the self, systematized into a societal operating system. Men are not born with emotional armor. They are forged into it. The hidden problem is what Carl Jung might have called a collective shadow projection, where every trait deemed weak, soft, or uncontrollable, vulnerability, fear, grief, uncertainty, is excised from the male identity and forced to exist only in the external world, projected onto women, onto nature, onto anything deemed other. This diagnosis exposes a fundamental flaw in the social contract. From the moment the boy is told to shake it off when he cries, a surgery begins. The neural pathways connecting feeling to expression are deliberately cauterized. The psychologist's key concept here is the emotional proxy system, a dynamic where men are trained to outsource their emotional labor. They learn that they are not allowed to feel sadness. They must feel anger. They are not allowed to express fear. They must exert control. Consequently, they unconsciously seek out partners to feel for them, to carry the grief, the softness, the intuition they were forced to amputate. You see this manifest in your own life when you are expected to be the emotional barometer for a relationship, to translate his unspoken anxiety into actionable conflict, or to manage moods he refuses to acknowledge as his own. The hidden problem is that men have been taught to exist outside of themselves, and the consequence is a world where intimacy becomes a battlefield for buried ghosts. Ignoring this diagnosis means perpetuating a cycle where half of humanity walks through life as a stranger to their own interior world. Consider the architecture of your daily life. The silences at dinner tables. The arguments that spiral not from the topic at hand, but from the inability to name the feeling beneath it. The friendships between men that exist for decades, yet never touch the soil of genuine vulnerability. A landscape of shared activities standing in for shared souls. These are not isolated incidents. They are the inevitable consequences of a world shaped by this severance. When an entire gender is conditioned to treat their own inner world as a threat, they do not simply suppress themselves. They build external systems to manage what they cannot internalize. The psychologist points to the metrics of collapse, the statistics of male loneliness that climb like a fever chart, the epidemic of silent suicides among middle-aged men, the way power structures become brittle because they are built by men who were taught that asking for help is the ultimate sin. But the consequences extend beyond the personal. They become societal weather patterns. You see it in boardrooms where vulnerability is mistaken for weakness, leading to catastrophic decisions born of ego preservation. You see it in political landscapes where dominance is valorized over diplomacy, where the inability to concede a point, to be wrong, becomes more important than the truth. The unseen consequence is that we are all living inside a psychological experiment where half the population is running a continuous, exhausting simulation of invulnerability. The stakes could not be higher. When men cannot access their own grief, they cannot process loss, so they cling to control. When they cannot express fear, they manufacture enemies to fight. The world is shaped by this problem because the world is run by men still bleeding from a wound they were taught to hide. The title suggests a solution, but understanding the urgency, why the walls must come down now, requires you to see that this architecture is not merely flawed. It is collapsing under its own weight. If you are ready to stop navigating the smoke and start understanding the structures beneath it, smash that like button, drop a comment with what resonated most, and subscribe, because this channel exists to give you the wisdom most are too afraid to speak aloud. The solution, as revealed in the quiet pages that men fear you will read, is not to fight the architecture. It is to refuse to inhabit it. The psychologist's prescription is a radical inversion of everything you have been taught about power. It begins with a single, devastatingly simple act: the withdrawal of your labor from the emotional proxy system. For generations, you have been subtly trained to absorb, translate, and manage the exiled emotions of men, to be the softness they cannot own, the intuition they cannot trust, the grief they cannot carry. The path to resolution requires you to stop, not with anger, but with the unshakable clarity of someone who finally sees the structure for what it is. This is where the counterintuitive strategy emerges. The prescription is not to demand that men open up, a demand that, ironically, often triggers deeper shutdown. Instead, the psychologist offers the metaphor of the unlocked door. Imagine a man who has spent his life in a room with no windows, convinced the walls are his strength. You cannot break the door down for him. That only reinforces his belief that the world is an invading force. But you can stop standing outside, pleading with him to come out. You can stop handing him the emotions he refuses to hold. You can walk to the other side of the house and begin building your own life with the full weight of your own wholeness. The unlocked door remains unlocked. He must choose to turn the handle himself. This is the secret the title guards. Your liberation cannot wait for his permission. The most profound act of love, for him, for yourself, is to stop participating in the dynamic that keeps you both imprisoned. When you cease to be the receptacle for his disowned self, he is finally left in the silence he built. And in that silence, he either meets himself or remains a stranger. Either way, you are free. The ultimate truth, the revelation that transforms everything preceding it, is this: men do not want you to find this video because it contains the map to a freedom they have not yet granted themselves. The deepest paradox, the one that echoes through every page of this psychological excavation, is that their opposition to your awakening is born from a desperate, unconscious hope that you will stay inside the labyrinth with them. If you see the walls, they become real. If you name the prison, they can no longer pretend it is a fortress. Your clarity becomes their mirror, and a mirror is the one thing a man who has fled his own reflection cannot bear to face. But here is the paradigm shift that changes everything. The goal was never to change them. The goal was never to be chosen by a man who is healed. The goal was never to convince, to persuade, to gently guide the emotionally absent toward presence. The goal was to become so radically whole yourself that you no longer recognize the architecture of half-living. The psychologist's final offering is that the deepest form of love is not caretaking, it is witnessing. When you stop asking men to be what they are not yet ready to be, and instead embody the fullness of your own emotional sovereignty, you do something more powerful than any argument. You model a way of being that cannot be argued with. You become the invitation, not the plea, not the ultimatum, the invitation. And whether he accepts it or not ceases to be the measure of your peace. The title warned you that men do not want you to find this video. Perhaps now you understand why. It does not give you a strategy to get what you want from them. It gives you the far more dangerous gift, the realization that you never needed their permission to be free. Look in the mirror. The only person who is ever keeping you trapped has just been released. The question now is, what world will you build with your unlocked hands?